Hello, everyone. This is Whitney Will from Star Hearth Astrology, and I am here today to talk to you about Aries season this year. So, happy equinox to everyone. The sun has just moved into Aries, and we are at our halfway point in between the winter solstice and the summer solstice, and having one day of equal day and night length. So, the story of Aries season this year, we're coming out off of a really kind of dreamy Pisces season. And Aries season is a bunch of quick shifts, and it's really kind of a tale of two different Mercuries. And that is actually going to make a big difference this season. So we start off Aries season with Mercury in Pisces, where it struggles a little bit. And then about halfway through on April 4th, Mercury is going to go into Aries. And the reason why this is significant this year is that Mars, the ruler of Aries, is in Gemini for the entirety of Aries season. And in Gemini, its ruler is Mercury. So we've got kind of the managing planet of the sun's time in Aries is taking cues from Mercury, and we have two very different Mercuries. So that's going to be a big theme that I talk about in this video. Otherwise, I'm going to go over the major transits that we're going to see in Aries season and kind of give you some ideas of what you can expect and how to structure your time this year while the sun is in Aries. Okay, so as always, astrology doesn't just start at these arbitrary things, so we have to kind of gain some context of where are we, what has been going on. Okay, so we're starting off at the first quarter of the lunar month, which means the moon is about to be half full. We are in waxing phase of the moon. The energy is growing, it's coming into the light. There's a lot of potency and a lot of push as we enter Aries season, which feels very harmonious with the Aries archetype. We have Mars approaching the North Node. So we've got Mars, our ability to take action and make decisions, is currently kind of swelling and inflating as it approaches the North Node. Mars is significant because Mars rules the sun in Aries season, though the sun is also exalted in Aries, so quite powerful. But there can be this kind of inflation of energy, and right, we're feeling it in a lot of people are getting vaccinated, and so stuff is starting to move again. We have this sense that the world is going to open up again, and we're ready to take actions. We're coming off of a dreamy Pisces season and ready to kind of hit the ground running. The world is waking up for spring. Here we go. And this Mars really wants to take action. We also have Mercury and Mars, which had two squares while they were in Aquarius and Taurus, because of Mercury's retrograde, are now completing their third square. But now they're in Pisces and Gemini, which is a little bit more of a confusing space. So we've got that tension in the air. We also have Venus coming very close to a conjunction with the sun. And while that can make her hyper present, the kind of weeks on either side of that when she is, when we can't see her because she is obscured by the light of the sun, can actually be kind of rough times for Venus. So we will have her conjunction with the sun in the middle of Aries season, and then she will pop out and we will be able to see her again. So that is also significant. We had that huge Aquarius pileup, and Aries is the sign that by sign sextiles Aquarius. So we've got a little bit more gentle energy coming from that. before we hit Taurus season, which Taurus is going to square the Aquarian energy. So that's kind of the theme for this year. We've got fixed sign squares, but we're not there yet. As the sun comes into Aries, the sun steps over the threshold into Aries basically together with Venus. So the sun moves into Aries early in the morning on March 20th, and then Venus is going to move in on March 21st. And then as the sun leaves Aries at the end of the season, it is going to step over that threshold into Taurus on the same day as Mercury. So we've got kind of a little bit of a buddy program going on this month with the sun and the personal planets. Okay, I have talked about this. As we get towards the end of Aries, what we are going to run into is everybody heading into squares with Pluto, who is still in Capricorn. So the beginning part of the month will probably feel nicer than the end, though it may be more chaotic. Yeah, we've got Mercury and Venus change signs. They both do it twice. Actually, they're moving quite quickly. They're moving very fast. They are both kind of as far away from their retrogrades as they get. And so moving at their fastest pace. Mercury is going to change signs at the last day of Aries season, so not such a worry. But Venus will go into Taurus a little bit before then. And then for the second half of Aries season, I mentioned Mercury was going to be in two different signs. So we've got Mercury in Pisces for the beginning, and Mercury is both in its detriment and its fall in Pisces really struggles to kind of know where it's going, know what it's doing, helping us see things clearly. It's a very inspired Mercury. But the clarity piece can be missing a little bit. And so during the first part of Aries season with Mars and Gemini taking cues from Mercury and Pisces, there can be some confusion about what to do, and that Mars and Gemini is going to want to do it all, and so it can you can find yourself spread too thin or just a little bit frenetic or erratic. Then when Mercury enters Aries on April 4th, then we have a situation where Mars is in Gemini, a sign ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is in Aries, a sign ruled by Mars. So they are said to be in mutual reception. And so it gets a little bit friendlier. It's still pretty frenetic in terms of taking action, but they work together a little bit better. They are vibing, so to speak. Okay, when we look at it in terms of the lunar cycle, the sun goes into Aries the day before that first quarter moon, and then it's going to build in intensity to a Libra full moon that we have on March 28th, and then it is going to round out, and we will have a new moon in Aries on April 11th. And then again, the sun will shift into Taurus just a day or so before the first quarter moon. So we have a busier, kind of louder first part of the month, more action oriented, and a more reflective dark hemicycle second part of Aries season. Okay, let's get into the individual transits. I feel like I'm going through this really fast, which actually feels really appropriate for Aries season. So the first quarter was mostly in Pisces season. The last thing that happens, we've got the sun moving into Aries. And in Aries, the sun is exalted. And one of the reasons for that is that it is at the spring equinox where the light triumphs over the dark, right? We've got equal day and equal night, but the light is growing. So a very powerful sun, a very powerful time. It's the astrological new year. It's the time to connect to the power and purpose and the projects of what you are actually going to do this year. Then very quickly, the next day, we've got the moon squaring the sun in a waxing square. So we that brings us into the second quarter of the lunar month, which is the week that builds up from a first quarter moon to the full moon of the month. So that day, we also have Venus into Aries, and we have Mars trine Saturn. And so this, I think, is a really kind of wonderful, auspicious day for coming into the month. We've got Venus moving into Aries, which is, she's having a bit of a rough time because she goes from Pisces, the sign of her exaltation, where she's very, very powerful, into Aries, which is the sign of her detriment, where she struggles a little bit more. But at the same time, we have her ruler, Mars, trining Saturn. And I think this is so powerful because this is just kind of where you connect the forward vision with all of the kind of realities of planning. The power and the purpose get on the same page. And so I think that's a good kind of grounded aspect to go along with Venus's ingress into Aries. And Venus in Aries is very, very effective. She's just not traditionally Venusian. I think what's beautiful about Venus in Aries is the immediacy of her desires and her ability to see what she wants and to act on it. Now, obviously, if you are natal Venus in Aries, you've got aspects to that Venus. It can be more or less complicated how that happens. But Venus in Aries gets excited, feels what she wants very quickly and takes quick action on it. Now, she might burn out on it as well. That's a different part of the story. But we have Venus in Aries get a little grabby, except for she is not visible because she's working towards a conjunction with the sun, which will happen on Friday the 26th. We'll get to that in a couple aspects. Okay, on the 23rd, we have Mercury square to Mars. So them is fighting words, or more like them is very confusing, mixed messages that could be extremely frustrating. I think is more what it looks like in mutable signs, and particularly in Pisces and Gemini. So yeah, there could be some frustration places right here. You can always not say things. You can just not say them. Yeah, Mercury's in Pisces. I don't know, watercolor paint your frustrations out. Then the next day we have Mercury square to the nodes. And so that can be kind of a tense aspect. We've got a little bit of where is the story going? Is Mercury working on the past? Is Mercury working on the future? And this is going to be an interesting storyline because when we get into the next couple eclipse seasons, they are pretty involved with Mercury. So we're going to have an eclipse that is conjunct a retrograde Mercury in Gemini in June. And then we actually have another eclipse in December that is conjunct a direct Mercury, but a Mercury in Sagittarius that's in its detriment. So Mercury and the nodes are really in quite a dance this year. We're figuring out where we're going. And Mercury is ruling the North Node right now. So Mercury is in a square to the North Node that it rules, right? And this is really the path finding. So if you find yourself lost or not sure which direction to go at this point in something in your life, that would actually be pretty appropriate. And so just try and map it out, and you don't have to make a really strong decision, though sometimes squares can try and push it. But I would try not to do something that you couldn't change your mind about later. Then on the 26th, so this is Friday the 26th, we have Venus and the Sun conjoining in Aries. And at the same time, we have Mars conjoining the North Node in Gemini. So the Venus-Sun conjunction is called a cazimi. We have Venus on the far side of the sun. So Venus conjoins the sun at 2 different times. Once at the midpoint in her retrograde, so she's moving backwards, and the other time when she is on the far side of the sun from Earth. And if you follow the Venus myth, what's happening here is she is going from a maiden morning star Venus to a more mature, wise, crone evening star Venus. And so at this point, between retrogrades, there's a kind of relaxation that happens. I actually think these weeks and maybe even this month in particular can be difficult because Venus is so far away from us and she's not visible, so we don't really get her gifts. This is a really intense time for feeling this kind of holy longing. And when she pops out on the other side and is the evening star, we kind of feel the acceptance of the limitations of our desires in the world. And so we're a little bit more gentle in our pursuit of them until the next Venus retrograde, where she gets reborn as a baby, grabby Venus. And that Venus retrograde starts at the very, very end of 2021, around Christmas. So on December 19th, she will go retrograde in Capricorn. So it's really more of a 2022 transit, but we are halfway in between Venus retrogrades. There can be a clarity around desire and how it connects with purpose. So that can be really useful. Their ruler, Venus and the Sun in Aries, are ruled by Mars, and Mars is conjoining the North Node. And if you're interested in this transit, I go into this transit pretty at length in my equinox video that I uploaded yesterday. So you can check that out if you're interested. Mars is conjoining the North Node. And when planets conjoin the North Node, their archetypes can get very inflated and kind of larger than life. And so there's this way in which there could be this impulse to action that is big, that where we cross lines we can't come back from. And in a lot of instances, that can be totally fine. Now you have to, right? You can't be angry about what happens afterwards. Well, you can be, but it's not helpful. But yeah, there's some kind of big action. And it's just days before a full moon. So I think it could be loud. I think the volume is turned up all the way on this one. I'd love to hear your stories if you encounter anything. And so that's especially if you are in an annual perfection year that is Venusian, solar, or Martial. Martian? Ugh, Martian just reminds me of Looney Tunes. Okay, so then we have a Libra full moon that happens on Sunday. The exact moment of peak fullness is during the middle of the day. And this Libra full moon is going to remind us of death. Because that moon, that inner part of us, that animal that resonates with the world around us, is full in the sign of Libra, and the sun is in the sign of Aries. The sun is connected with our purpose as an individual. The moon is going to balance that solar energy by reminding us of our connections. And from a seasonal standpoint, the moon is in the sign of autumn falling, and the sun is in the sign of spring rising. And so there's this way in which, as the sun is moving into brightness. The moon, which is our memory, is remembering how all things die. We are digging up our garden beds, and the moon is remembering putting them to sleep. And so there can be this tension, right? Just as we want to go ahead in this very Aries fashion, which is, this is what I'm doing, and you can come along if you can keep up. That Libra moon is remembering who we have left behind. I'll do a full video on the Libra full moon. And I'm also going to be doing a weaving workshop on this Libra full moon. And I'm looking at doing more kind of craft and full moon rituals, because I think it's so powerful for us to ground the tension of full moons by getting into our hands. And so if you are interested in those, let me know, and I will make sure you are on the list for future ones. Okay, the next day we have Mercury conjoining Neptune. So we go from the peak emotional tension of the month into kind of the peak confusion of the year. And so there can really be this sense of not knowing where we're going with Mercury conjoining Neptune. But we can be dazzled by fantasy in those moments. And I think that that is really important, both as a rest from reality and also to harvest inspiration. So I wouldn't make super poignant decisions, but I would absolutely spend time with art and fantasy. And then we've got a few days, if you look at that, we've got the better part of a week. The 29th is a Monday, and then we don't have another significant aspect until, we just got a bunch of sextiles that I didn't even put in here, really, until April 3rd, which is the following Saturday. And so on the 3rd, we have Mercury going into Aries. So this is going to be what divides Aries season in half. So the first part is going to be this kind of Mercury in Pisces, not really sure what we're doing. We're looking at everything. We're weighing the different options. We're seeing where our soul is pulling us. And I think that that is really, really important to lean into that. But then when Mercury goes into Aries, that is when we can actually take action. We'll have Mars and Mercury in mutual reception. Now, this configuration, this mutual reception can get quite intellectually combative, but in terms of just where we're going and what we're doing, there is, it can be quite potent. Now it's definitely going to leap before it looks, but hopefully you've been doing the looking with Mercury and Pisces, which cannot give you an accurate lay of the land mentally, but can do it as it resonates in your soul body or something, right? You can kind of connect to what is significant beyond yourself. Okay, got that Libra full moon. Okay, so then we will hit the 4th quarter the following day. So the waning square happens on that Sunday, the 4th, and we will enter the sleepiest quarter of the lunar month. And as you can see, it looks very sleepy. We don't really have many significant aspects at all in this quarter. So it's really a time to rest. I know I talked about action, but there can be significant action in rest. rest is actually not inactive at all. It's the place of healing. It's the place of gaining clarity. This quarter in my home and in my family is my favorite. I do kind of like a last minute grocery shop on the waning square, and then we do not go to the store again until after the new moon. And part of that is just this ritual of like using things up, and also my pantry is way easier to clean when we have used things up. And so there's actually a lot of activity in kind of organizing and cleaning and taking care of the home. It's just not focused outwards, and it's really not about acquisition. And then we've got this Mars square Neptune, which could be a really kind of confusing, haywire aspect, but I don't think it will be, because we've got a little nothing of a moon. So this is, again, more of kind of like a fantastical aspect than one that I think will be acted out by a lot of people. So we have a week of just pretty low key. And then on the 11th, in the evening on the 11th, we have an Aries new moon. So we've got this really kind of sleepy weekend, and then we'll have a new moon, and we'll head into the following week with all of the ecstatic energy of the waxing cycle of the moon. On this new moon, we have Venus square to Pluto. Venus square to Pluto, I find that it is a trigger for trauma in relationships. So walk on eggshells around this new moon. Luckily, it is a new moon, so it might happen more internally than externally, but still something to be delicate about. And I'm keeping a special eye on Venus and Pluto this year, because the Venus retrograde that I mentioned a little bit earlier, that starts in December, starts with Venus conjoining Pluto. And so there will be big Venus-Pluto energy around that retrograde. And so I am, just noticing what comes up around Venus-Pluto to see kind of what we might be working on in that Venus retrograde. Because I think that is the responsible thing to do. Now, when she conjoins Pluto, that is a very different feel from the square, but good to keep our eyes on nonetheless. Then just a few days later, we have Venus leaving Aries, leaving the sign of her detriment and entering into Taurus. So for the last 5 days of Aries season, we have Venus in Taurus out. She's been put out to pasture. She is no longer a war horse in Aries. She is living it up in the meadows. So that should be lovely, as always, our time with Venus in Taurus. And she should be able to connect to the body, learn what it really means to feel safe, to feel comfortable, to feel connected to the world around us, to understand how grounding the world around us can be for us, the actual physical things in the world. What is their value? Venus and Taurus is our time to connect to that. Then we have a Sun square to Pluto and Mars trine to Jupiter. These are both aspects that can make things seem like a really, really big deal. And so again, that Mars trine to Jupiter can take really big action, and we're in the waxing part of the lunar cycle. And so it can just, yeah, there's a lot of potency behind that. Yeah, I would be careful about taking really, really big rash actions. If your ego kind of gets offended, I hate the term ego, but like, yeah, if there's just stuff getting under your skin and you're getting really offended, I would just back off, because this is certainly, these two aspects together can certainly look like overreaction. Then we have a Mercury square to Pluto. So again, we're going to have things seeming like a big deal. So it kind of plays into that, and that Mercury square to Pluto will be building during the previous day. And then we have Mercury conjoining the sun. So just as I talked about Venus conjoining the sun, this is kind of the mercurial equivalent of that. So again, Mercury conjoins the sun at two different times, one at the midpoint of its retrograde, and the other time is at the point in between retrogrades. So we are halfway in between retrogrades by the end of Aries season. Mercury is going to conjoin the sun. That brings us this kind of clarity. Again, Mercury, just like Venus, is going from being a morning star to an evening star, which is the more elderly, wizened Mercury. Can also be Mercury that is less curious, is more invested in its own ideas and what it thinks. So a double-edged sword, that one. But this Mercury conjoining the sun is called a cazimi and can offer some mental clarity on the path of where we're going. And then right after, the day after, they both enter Taurus on the 19th. And so we'll talk about that a lot in Taurus, but we've got these kind of final insights of Mercury in Aries and the sun in Aries before they both go out to pasture in Taurus. Now, we have just a few days after that, so on April 23rd, which I know this is technically part of Taurus season, we have Mars go into Cancer. So we have Mars ruled by Mercury, and we get to get really three different flavors of that, even though the kind of Mars ruled by Mercury in Taurus is really just a few hours on the very last day. But it can be really powerful to just kind of notice what comes up around those things. Mercury in Pisces being very dreamy. Mercury in Aries being very impulsive, jumping to conclusions. Mercury in Taurus is very taciturn. If you want to connect with Mercury in Taurus, well, for one, yeah, can be powerful to work with your hands and soil. So that's it. Again, I will release videos for the Aries new moon on the 11th and the Libra full moon on March 28th. That goes in depth into the dynamics of those lunations. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you very much. If you would like and subscribe to my channel, that would make a huge difference, and I would appreciate it so, so much. Thanks for joining me today, and I will be back for Taurus season in a month. Happy spring.